Good morning, folks. This is John Kogan. I'm the CEO of Performative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First, I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar entitled Owning Technology as a Finance Leader, Cloud, Mobile, Social Media, and Analytics. With the significant changes in business, technology, and the economy, the role of finance leaders in planning, decision-making, and driving technology adoption at their companies has never been more crucial. New technologies such as cloud, mobile, social, big data, and analytics are creating new challenges and opportunities in areas under the responsibility of the CFO. So how do finance leaders understand and effectively satisfy the technology needs of those at their companies who drive company efficiencies and top-line growth? What are the implications of these technologies for companies today, and how is the CFO's role evolving to address them? We will touch on these issues and more in today's webinar, so thanks so much for joining us. First up, a quick note on Performative. We're the largest and fastest growing online community for senior level finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. It's a completely ad-free, noise-free community of a lot of folks, and basically what we do all day is answer one another's questions. So it's all peer-based. Performative doesn't answer your questions. We provide the platform. And what you'll see is CFOs, treasurers, controllers, accounting managers, you name it. They're online asking questions and giving answers to one another. It's all completely free, no ads, no self-promotion. Feel free to check it out at performative.com if you haven't already. A couple quick notes on this morning's event. First off, a link to today's presentation and a link to the video of this webinar, which we will record, will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. And this the deck that you'll see this morning is already posted at performative.com/resources. It'll be on top of that list. So if you want to get it right now, follow along on your own or make notes, etc. It's right there, performative.com/resources. You can download it for free at any time, starting right now. Next up, we have a number of folks online today who are here and will be getting CPE credits. And they will need to answer all of today's 3 polling questions. So we will have a brief interruptions in today's program where we will ask 3 polling questions. If you're here for CPE credits, you must answer those questions. But even if you're not, we'd like you to answer those questions. They're statistical in nature, and we'll actually show the results when we get to the end of today's webinar. Take you 15 seconds to answer, and it'll be interesting to see how today's user base turns out on these questions. So we'll turn those around when we get to the Q&A portion of today's event, and you'll be able to see how everyone voted. And it's all anonymous. So next, please ask questions on today's topic via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. If you take a quick look, you'll see a little questions area. You might have to expand it by clicking on the plus next to it. Ask questions at any time. If it's a logistical question, we've got someone online who can answer those as we go. If it's a question for today's presenter, we'd love to get those, and we have a whole Q&A section of this webinar devoted at the end, so we'll do our best to get to all the questions asked at that time. And finally, when you finish today, you'll be prompted to take a short survey regarding the webinar. We always want to be able to do better the next time. And your feedback is invaluable. It takes about 60 seconds. Also, if you'd like to connect with today's speaker, that's just a click of a mouse away. We make it really easy in that survey, and we'll help make that connection. It'll be seamless via email. So those are the sort of housekeeping items that I wanted to hit in today's learning objectives you see on the screen right now. And the bottom line is, there's a lot of technology coming out. The Office of the CFO, which includes the core finance organization, the accounting organization, the treasury organization, internal audit, frequently purchasing, and many other functions. There's so much technology coming out that's impacting each of these areas. It's actually hard to know what to do, where to go, what platform should you be looking at and leveraging. And what do I do with all of this data that's being kicked off by all of these systems, whether it's your company's Twitter feed or new production or point-of-sale systems? There's just a flood coming at you, a flood of data, a flood of technology. And today we're going to look more at what it means to own technology as a finance leader and how you can actually help lead the charge rather than passively sitting there and using whatever you've got. And leading us in this discussion today, it's my pleasure to introduce Bruce Bendix. Bruce is a director in the Growth Strategies Consulting Group of Baker Tilly Virchow Krause, LLP. He has 20 years of consulting experience working with small, medium, and large enterprises across a wide range of industries. Bruce's expertise is in assessing, creating, and implementing innovative strategies for sustainable and profitable growth, and he's going to walk us through this very important content this morning. Bruce, welcome, and thanks so much for joining.
John, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to present at your webinar. And before I get started, let me just give you a sense in terms of where I thought we might take the discussion today. First of all, I wanted to set the context of all these changes that are going on and introduce something that we've called the dynamic enterprise, which is where we see companies needing to move to be more effective in today's environment. And then I'm going to provide our perspective on these two big technology megatrends which John alluded to. One is around cloud, social, and mobile, and the other is around analytics and big data. And then finally, we want to talk about how all this impacts the role of finance leadership to continue to add value in your organizations. So stepping back and to add context for discussion, I think it's worth considering, the forces of change that are impacting companies today. And in this diagram, we've isolated 4 of those. And if we look at the upper left-hand side, the macroeconomic forces are significant. Ever since the global economic crisis, the landscape, the economic landscape has really been permanently altered. Many economists don't see the robust economic growth coming for some time. We're also more connected to a worldwide economy, so the economic issues of Europe or the slowdown in China also impacts us. And this is unusual. Normally we've had slowdowns and we could count on a recovery in a relatively short term. But in this case, companies need to change their strategies to adjust to this new normal and prepare for the possibility of future shocks. And then if we move to the right, the competitive landscape is also changing significantly. Global competition, of course, is old news, but what we're seeing now is companies moving into new industries and redefining them and destroying incumbents. All we have to do is look at the disruptive strategies by companies like Apple or Google or Netflix or Amazon and see that what they've done to BlackBerry, to Microsoft, to Blockbuster, to Borders. At first we saw this just in digitally based industries, but now we're seeing it everywhere. And then as we move down to the lower right, the workplace is changing dramatically too. We have several generations within the same workforce. They have older and younger workers have different values, different motivations, different comfort with technology. Baby boomer executives see the world very differently than millennials, and companies need to adapt. And furthermore, the need for talent is growing, and the supply-demand imbalance is really shifting in favor of talent. Don't make the same mistake that the NFL did in confusing labor for talent with the referees. It obviously has really devastating consequences. But today we're going to spend our time on the 4th trend, technology, in which we're seeing big changes that have impacts for all companies and the role of the CFO. Technology advances, rarely steadily advance. Rather they often evolve in surges, and I believe that we're in the midst of one of those surges. So in response to these changes, companies have a choice. They can fight or embrace. They can be active or inactive. And we see many companies that choose to fight the change through protection or regulation. These companies have a lot to lose against these changes, so they seek to build walls and moats, with the assistance of government and big-time lawyers to affect them. Think of, big entertainment companies in the music business, or big banks, or big healthcare companies. This might work in the short term, but this strategy, I don't think is sustainable in the long term as the gulf between the external and internal worlds gets greater. On the bottom left, there, other companies just kind of pretend the change will go away. Denial is a pretty universal human condition, and it lives very comfortably in the executive suite. Perhaps the high compensation of senior executives may partially explain that. Upton Sinclair once wrote, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding that. And I think there's, unfortunately, a lot of that going on. But then there you have the third group, and that's a group that may recognize that the change is coming, but they simply hope that they can adapt without really addressing what they need to change. They say, well, challenging times have come before, and they've survived. So with their limited experience, they become overconfident. But finally, we have the dynamic enterprise, and that's the company that sees the change and adapts to it. As Jack Welch said, accept reality as it is and not as you want it to be. But more importantly, they respond appropriately to these changes, which is the basis for our dynamic enterprise point of view. And so for those that are interested further in that, we can certainly provide more information if you want to get back to me after this webinar. But today I'm going to focus on that lower left-hand side, the technology challenges and trends and the opportunities they provide within your finance organization. So if we step back from a technology standpoint, what we see is the convergence of a number of key technologies. And I see this as the electrification moment of the IT industry. So what do I mean by that? Well, a century ago, we had the technology shift from steam power to electric power. And think about the huge changes that occurred because of that technological change. Steam power factories were built with huge pulley systems such that power was conveyed from a central point to co-located machines. But once we had electric power, we now have the ability to motorize each machine. And this changed processes, it enabled new products and new industries. And similarly, I think this technological convergence will have implications that we don't even know yet, but we do know that they're coming. And as in earlier transformations, the early users will benefit the most. This is because they'll be ahead of the learning curves, and conversely, those that are laggards will be left behind. So let's start with cloud computing. So of course, cloud computing is the use of computing resources, hardware and software, that are delivered as a service over a network. And there are three fundamental models. The most basic is infrastructure as a service. So this provides the raw computing power either physically or virtually. And a company provides their own operating system and application software. So think of Amazon or Rackspace as examples of companies that provide this. And then you have platform as a service. And here the model extends to include a computing platform, typically an operating system, a programming language, execution environment, databases, a web server. And so examples of that could be are Force.com and Microsoft Azure. And then finally, you have software as a service, where the application runs in the cloud. And within this, there's actually models within that. There's the single tenant model, in which there's a one-to-one relationship between the user and the provider. But better economics actually come from a multi-tenancy model, where there's just one set of code, and the infrastructure updates and maintenance are shared across all the users, therefore achieving some cost and performance advantages. But the significance of cloud computing is not just the technology, but what it enables. And we're a big fan of Peter Finger, who's written extensively about this. There's a couple things to keep in mind. The first of all is that in the past, IT has, in a sense, ossified from processes. It made them less flexible, largely because of the work IT had to do to add technology to the processes. But we believe that this technology will enable really a third wave of business process management, where we're implementing a new process will be as easy as querying a database. And mature companies can recapture that advantage and recapture the same advantage of newcomers to have the freedom to tailor processes to change precisely the current market conditions. And we'll also see startups that can build from scratch systems that will keep them forever young. The second implication is that IT is now out of the four walls of the IT department. So you'll see a plethora of cloud-enabled processes that will be increasingly too productive and economical for you to ignore. And the old constraints like being tied to your desktop or lack of data will simply go away. And the third implication is that this democratizes IT. All this capability integration is happening at the cloud level, which means that the IT advantage of the very large companies is gone. In fact, I could argue that the economies of scale are actually going to work in reverse. Why do I say that? Because now any company can have access to very powerful converged solutions. And large companies are by nature slow-moving, so smaller, faster, and nimbler companies may be able to seize the competitive advantage faster. So a few more observations to share. Cloud platforms will be the enabling technologies behind mobile, social, and other solutions. These cloud platforms contain fewer stack components than what on-premise vendors must support. So therefore, your maintenance and development costs are lower in the cloud space. And so more of your development resources can be focused on new functionality rather than regression testing multiple technology stacks, resulting in much more features delivered faster. And more external third-party data is being served up in these cloud ecosystems. Businesses that want access to that information will need to have cloud integration and possibly cloud applications to access this data. So what we've realized is the real value of cloud computing is not just in these lowering technology costs, although that's significant, but it is building new business models and new innovation capabilities with new talent that should propel finance into a new strategic role. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John for a polling question.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Okay, as I mentioned before, we've got 3 polling questions today for those who are here for CPE credit, and even if you're not here for CPE credit, we'd love you to take 15 seconds, maybe less, and answer these polling questions. And we will turn these around at the end and take a look at the responses so you can see how you stand relative to all of your peers who are on this call. I will also remind you at this moment that you can ask questions at any time via the question area of your GoToWebinar control panel. And if it's a tactical issue, then we'll answer it as we go. If it's a question for Bruce around today's core topic, then we'll hang on to it and address it when we get to the Q&A section of today's presentation. All right, I'll leave this out for another 5 seconds, and then we'll get the last few votes in and head right back to Bruce. All right, at this point, I'm going to close it down. Thanks, everyone, for voting. We had almost 90% there. And Bruce, back to you.
Great. So let's move on now to talk about the other technology mega trend, and that's social and mobile. So, what we're seeing is really a explosive proliferation of mobile devices and applications and social platforms. So what's the implications of all this? Well, first of all, mobile devices are now the IT platform. We went from mainframes to minis to PCs, now we're at mobile devices. But what's interesting about these devices, unlike the other, is that they're largely consumer devices. So hence you have this consumerization of IT. So you don't own the technology platform anymore. It's owned by your customers and your employees. It's called Bring Your Own Technology to Work Day, every day. And in fact, when we look at studies, we see that 95% of information workers say they have at least one self-purchased device they take to work. And this raises the expectations for IT to have systems that work as well and as seamlessly as their consumer-based systems. The second implication is that security threats are a lot different. It's analogous to our global security threats that have changed from the Cold War to the War on Terror. We may feel secure that we've protected ourselves from huge blow-ups, but we're still very vulnerable to targeted attacks. There's something called spear phishing, which seeks to identify individuals by masquerading as a trusted source. And because it's targeted, it's much harder to detect and could be much more destructive. The third point is that the valuable data is on the outside. It's not in your ERP systems. Retailers have real-time buying data with manufacturers. EMRs are capturing patient data. Embedded sensors are monitoring driving behaviors for insurance companies. It goes on and on and on. And not only that, but the valuable data is not necessarily the way you want it. A lot of it's unstructured, which your ERP systems can't handle. Fourth, there's higher expectation for technology use. People are evaluating the effectiveness of IT technology against a higher competitive ecosystem, which is a winner-take-all situation. And all we have to look at some of the vendors with their valuations to understand that. And lastly, this is only increasing. We're only seeing the beginning of this proliferation. So at this point, I'd like to move on to the next big trend, which is big data analytics, in-memory, and geospatial data. The first thing to understand about this is just the data tsunami that we're facing. In the most recent, Harvard Business Review issue, which features big data, by the way, MIT, some authors from MIT stated that as of 2012, about 2.5 exabytes of data are created each day, and that number is doubling every 40 months or so. And that article goes on to say that more data crosses the internet in every second than was stored in the entire internet 20 years ago. Walmart collects 2.5 petabytes of data every hour from its customers. And by the way, a petabyte is 1 quadrillion bytes, or the equivalent of 20 million filing cabinets. Just incredible amount of data that we're dealing with. But the data it's not just the volume that's the issue. We have now a huge variety of data, and 80% of this data is now coming in non-traditional forms, such as Twitter and blogs and web streams, location-based, not in the kind we're used to. And there's this velocity of data. It never turns off. And in fact, some have been able to take advantage of that velocity. There's an example where the MIT Media Lab used parking at Christmas time to estimate Macy's retail sales for the day after Thanksgiving. That was more accurate than what Wall Street had forecast. And there's more volatility of this data. And nobody tells you, what that descriptive information in the Twitter feed could have significance to your business. So let's take a look at the kind of data that we're looking at. First of all, we have ERP data, and that's been a given. Around that, we have more CRM data coming from our CRM systems, RFID data coming from those sensors. We're able to track on the web, and POS data. That's been emerging. We've had that for a while, but now look at all the other external sources of data that we have. We have news events, television, print, weather. More on blogs and Yelp and social media. And all this is, the point is all this is outside your organization, and yet it's having greater and greater relevance to your business. So what we're finding is that companies are dealing with these kind of three issues when it comes to data management. The first of it has to deal with dealing with all this volume of data. And 1 in 3 managers today, frequently, make decisions without the information they need, even though it may be out there. The other is dealing with the variety of data, in that much of this data is in separate silos. So bringing the data and get the right data for you to do your job is becoming more and more of a problem. And then finally is, with all this, what do you do with it? many leaders, 3 and 4 say leaders have challenges in doing the analytics required to make predictions or make judgments based on all this data. So that lays out the the data issue. What I'd like to do now is now step back and talk about how these new technologies are driving new processes, which are driving new business models. And I've done a lot of work recently in the credit union business, and it's fascinating to look at just some of the very typical financial processes and how they've changed. So we've taken a look at one here, which is just the auto loan quote process. And the traditional process, it's a fairly time-consuming. It requires an in-person visit to get a loan. A lengthy approval process, and this is how it's worked for years. But now look at how it is changing, and we're going to start with from the view of the applicant of making a loan. So the applicant now has a lot more sources of information than they had before. They can go on Facebook, to start to get some recommendations, some sense from their friends. They now can read reviews from Yelp. They can go out and they can research rates from bankrate.com, and then they can further go out to the web to LendingTree, which helps them identify sources of financing for them. They can get quick quotes, and then they can use VeriSign to actually sign that and get an instant loan. So from their standpoint, it's changed dramatically. And then think about it from the credit union standpoint, how their process has changed. LendingTree now can examine all these applicants' data from numerous cloud sources to triangulate all sorts of data on the creditworthiness of that. They can use analytics to do a much better job of predicting the performance of that loan. They can do that instantaneously, provide a quote, and then have those documents done almost immediately. Just one example of how a process can dramatically change. But now let's look at the next implication of all this, which is business models. And all we need to look is a couple of established pre-internet business models. We call the killer bees. Blockbuster, Best Buy, and Borders. And they were once the darlings of their industry. And then you had, in the pre-cloud world, you had a number of new business models that disrupted them. You had Netflix by mail and Amazon by mail. You had Redbox, and these were the first new business models that really created some challenge for those companies. But now look where we've gone in the cloud-enabled world. We have another new set of business models that's even making those others models even more obsolete. We have Netflix on demand. We have Apple TV. We have Kindle Fire. No longer are we dependent on the mail system, for example, to deliver these services. Each of these are significant business models, and each of them are destroying the business model of the past. So now what we'd like to do is step back and consider the so what's of this situation, and that is, what does this mean for finance leadership? And what we see is that there's actually 4 big implications to finance. The first one is being a resource manager, and that is changing the way you apply resources where needed to drive business results. The second area is what we call an external enabler. So looking to cloud solutions and external partners external data to provide more value. We'll talk about that. The third is around a business value creator. We believe that the finance function is in a unique position to bring IT and business together to increase business value through technology. And finally, it's the talent manager to ensure that you're bringing the right talent in your organization to address these changes. So let's start with the first. In this new era of dynamic business, the traditional budgeting process, is really insufficient. Traditional budgeting, takes an inordinate amount of time. It's backward looking, and frankly, it encourages gaming the system. It frankly prevents managers from seizing opportunities to create value. So it's inherently undynamic. It casts in stone a set of assumptions based on the past without the flexibility to change to new conditions. So what we're seeing is more progressive companies changing that traditional budgeting model to something that is more like a real-time resource allocation process using a larger set of non-financial data. So I'm speaking this webinar in Oak Brook, Illinois, and here locally in this city outside of Chicago is a company called LK Manufacturing, which is a manufacturer of kitchen products. And what they're doing is they are using continuous forecasting as part of an integrated management tool, aided by activity-based costing, to enable them to bore into each line of the P&L to provide insight. One example is they used analytics to look at the relationship between a very expensive free finishing process and sales. And what they found was that there was really little correlation between adding that expensive process and sales. So they essentially eliminated it, saved millions of dollars in manufacturing process with little impact on sales. So the next kind of key implication we believe for finance leadership is around being an external enabler. And we see the CFO as one that in finance is looking to partnerships and external groups to explore new opportunities in many ways. One is to gain expertise outside your organization, to gain data, which is more and more on the outside, to gain processing power through cloud computing, and get new perspective as well as things are changing, and what I will do is provide I think a few examples of that. On the upper right, the airplane is refers to a number of airlines that have come up with a solution to deal with the challenge of accurate ETAs at the airports. Basically, the past process was that ETAs, expected arrival times, into the airports were provided by pilots. They would estimate when they would come in, and then everything from the staffing, maintenance, all the gate operations were based on that estimate. And as you could guess, that the estimate and the actual could be off at times, and that was quite expensive in running the airline operation. So what they have done is they've actually turned to a third-party external group, a group called Passeur Aerospace, and they have a service called Right ETA. And what this service does is it combines weather data, it combines feeds from radar, It combines flight schedules from all the airlines, okay, and it analytically then does a better job at predicting that ETA. It has essentially eliminated that gap, and through that has made the airlines much more efficient in terms of that their airline ground operations. Another example is in Sears Holdings, where they needed to be much more effective at promotions. And what they were finding is that, and this is true of many companies, is that data to analyze these promotions is in all these separate data warehouses. And so they used a firm called Cloudera to create something called a Hadoop cluster, which is a way to combine data and cluster it so that you're able to analyze it all within that cluster and look at effectiveness. And that work has led to significant greater effectiveness in their promotions. So two examples of looking to the outside to create more value. The third area that we want to talk about is the business value creator. I think that the CFO and the finance function is in the best position to be a business value creator, or certainly in a unique one. First of all, they oftentimes have relationship with IT and with the business. They understand how business value is created. They can sell business value to the CEO and the executive committee, and they can ensure the resources are available for success. So in a very, very unique position. And I'll give you one example of where a company is starting to do that, and I think it's quite interesting. This is a Midwestern picture frame manufacturer that is a supplier to a lot of the mega stores, Walmart and Target. And their IT group figured out that they could directly analyze the data from the Walmart POS system, and through the analytics of that data, do a better job than Walmart in forecasting demand for that category. So they started using that just to get better at forecasting, and obviously you could imagine some of the supply chain efficiencies they had with that. But then they had a thought. They said, we have developed this capability. It's quite valuable. What if we took that capability and basically developed a tool and sold that to other Walmart suppliers? So this company is actually considering looking at a brand new business, taking that capability that they developed within the IT function and taking it outside. And the finance function is very involved. The IT group in this particular company reports to the finance function. So this is where these kinds of opportunities can be born within companies, and companies can take advantage of them. So when we think about how companies can start to add value, I think with these capabilities, I think they need to think in terms of a roadmap, and we see kind of three major steps to that roadmap. The first part of that, and the kind of foundational part, is to develop these core cloud capabilities. So that can give you lower cost of ownership, increased speed, and here you're establishing the processes and change management for new cloud capabilities. The next step is then to create value on top of that. So you can put in new capabilities, new processes to exploit today's innovations. So that can be around some of the ERP systems, cloud-based, financial CRM like Plex, NetSuite, Salesforce. Those are examples of that. Taleo, and here you can build upon that lower cost of ownership and increase your agility. And then you can move ahead of that to continue to think about how you're making better decisions faster, and use this to start to rewrite the competition. Think about ways in which you can innovate around new processes and new business models to create added value. And this is you know, a point of view that that we've written about. You can see the source there, and if you're interested in that white paper, you know, please get back to me or John, and we'll make sure that you get that. The last thing I want to talk about is talent and talent manager. And you know, typically some of the talent that we'll find in finance organizations are good at you know, some of the you know, reporting and budgeting and financial close and that kind of thing, but not necessarily as well suited for, you know, multidimensional analysis and thinking about, you know, external data and implications of that. So I think the finance function needs to ask themselves, you know, what do you have today? You know, what are the skills that you need, and do you have the right skills, and how are you going to get those? And so some examples that we might think about, you know, from a skills standpoint are, you know, we see a lot of finance organizations that have, you know, people that are really strong in data center operations, but now as the world is moving much more towards these mobile apps, you know, having those kind of skills in designing and deploying mobile applications is going to become more critical. We have traditionally expertise in third-generation programming languages, but now we need applications around building platforms of a service, or, you know, we've talked about within analytics, you know, Apache Hadoop, you know, using Hive as an example for programming those kinds of projects. We're moving from where maintenance was a large part of the IT in a budget and value added to now where we're thinking about development. So changing that orientation is important. It used to be all about cost efficiency. You know, how can we do what we do as efficiently as possible? But now a lot of these opportunities that we're seeing are around revenue enhancement, and that's a whole change in mindset and skill set. And finally, you know, cost accounting has been a core skill in the finance area, but now we need to go much deeper and have a whole sophistication around analytics that's kind of in the data scientist you know, job description. You know, the data scientist is they say is now going to be the hottest job in the 21st century. These are talented and skilled people, and there's a shortage of them, and yet they're going to become increasingly valuable in this this world. So, with that, I'm gonna leave you with a thought, and this is actually one of my favorite Albert Einstein quotes. It's one that doesn't necessarily make me friends among my accountant friends, but I think it's increasingly relevant here. You know, everything that can be counted does not necessarily count, and everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. So you know, as we reflect on that in a dynamic world, you know, we need to pay particular attention to what counts and what doesn't count. And then these new technologies are providing challenges and opportunities that are not captured by what you're counting in your ERP systems. Big data has the opportunity to really figure out what really counts in your business. And so I think that the focus of a good finance organization needs to be on dynamically assessing the right information to make the decisions that will drive your business results. And I would say nothing else counts. John, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the opportunity to present to you.
Well, that was great to hear, and a lot of very interesting information, and I think things that are going to affect people on this webinar deeply. So let's go ahead. We're going to get into questions in just a moment, but let's go ahead and get to the last two polling questions here. I'm just popping the first one out there right now. So we'll do these two, and just like before, if you're here for CPE credits, you really need to answer these in order to get those credits. Even if you're not here for CPE, please take a few seconds and answer these questions. We'll do this one, and then in about 20 seconds, we'll go ahead and launch the second one. I'll take this opportunity to remind you that you can ask questions at any point here via the question area of your GoToWebinar control panel, and Bruce will take a swing at answering them. I'm going to go ahead and close out the first question here now, and we'll kick right over to the second question. And by second, actually, this would be the third question in today's webinar. So we'll go ahead and leave this out for about 45 seconds. Also, another quick reminder, when we complete this morning's webinar and shut it down, or when you step off, we will present you with a quick survey. On that survey, we make it very easy for you to request a connection with Bruce, and we're happy to do that. We'll get you guys together via email. We've already had some people request that via the question area, so we've captured those. But go ahead and just tick that box in the survey. I'll go ahead and leave this open for another 5 seconds, and then we will get into the questions. Okay, so I've just closed that down, and actually before we get to the questions, we'll take a quick minute to look back and share the responses to these polling questions that we've asked. The first polling question was, what organization owns finance technology at your company? And over a third is still owned by IT, and then a split between accounting and finance. Bruce, do you see this as a fairly typical or expected result?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so I guess kind of the question is, as we kind of move into those different areas of responsibility, you know, where's the innovation happening? Is it in finance or in IT in terms of really kind of driving the kinds of things that we've talked about?
And that's a really interesting question. Where's the innovation happening? And speaking as someone who's 20 years in finance and accounting, that's not a question we frequently ask ourselves.
Yeah.
But in today's world, it sounds like it's something we need to be asking ourselves.
Yep.
Okay, we'll go ahead and pop up the second question here. And as a reminder, is your company moving towards or away from finance and accounting owning corporate technology application strategy? So a few moving away. And 16% already finance already owns their apps, and the majority, well, I guess the largest result, no change from a few years ago, then 32% are moving towards. That's an interesting result there. Is that what you're seeing when you look at your client base?
Well, it's not too surprising, and actually I think it's encouraging because, as we talked about, you know, finance and accounting having a real understanding of the business to be able to own the corporate technology applications, I think you know, I think is important. So that's I think that is important. Now, one thing that is being touted quite a bit and quoted is Gartner did a report recently that said in the future that the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, is going to have a larger technology budget than the CFO and the CIO, which is kind of you know, certainly a contrarian view, but one in which if you start thinking about the sophistication of marketing and how all this data is becoming external, it's a view that you could start to see, you know, as a scenario you could imagine.
Right. Right. Well, it sounds like companies are investing more dollars, or at least Gartner sees and thinks that will continue that companies are investing more dollars on the customer end, less on the sort of internal, maybe operational, analytical end.
Yep.
And facing the customer. Interesting. All right, one last poll question to share here, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Okay. The collaboration between finance, IT, and operations is managing and leveraging. In managing and leveraging my company's data is acceptable but needs improvement. I guess not terribly surprising to see that. Any surprises here, Bruce?
No, and this is I think this is where the big opportunity is to have that collaboration. And I think what has impeded that collaboration in the past is the silos of all this information, and now we're able through some of these tools and techniques to bring all this data together, these silos of data together, and have that collaboration. So I think there's I have optimism in the future that this will even improve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and get into questions here. A great question to start off with, and this is from a company that's looking at adopting the cloud, but they're not there yet. And they're asking, is there a standard path, even a recommended path that companies follow to go from maybe on-premise, all on-premise, into the cloud? Like, do you start with your ERP systems or your point-of-sale systems, or how are folks most effectively doing this? Is there a best practice, et cetera?
Yeah, so, and I will refer you to this white paper that we have done in looking at that roadmap, which we, explain a little bit more detail. But yeah, companies start with putting together the basically the infrastructure. They will and then oftentimes start with maybe one of their process areas in which they can see some of the most immediate quick wins. If it's around operations, maybe it's the ERP. If it's around sales and marketing, maybe CRM and use Salesforce and that kind of thing. And then get some of that experience in one area, and then move to the other. I mean, many of these software as a service companies are built on a platform. So Salesforce, for example, has Force.com. So it's common that companies will start with one of those software as a service offerings, and then look to other offerings on that platform to provide additional functionality in other parts of their business.
And actually, for my part, I've also seen companies dip a toe in the water if you want to try a first cloud app. There are a lot of cloud apps that aren't right in the middle of the guts of what you're doing as a company and can be lower risk. Like go with Expensify to
Yep.
have cloud-based T&E expense visibility and management, et cetera. That's super low risk, very inexpensive, and gives you some experience with the cloud, a taste of what you can get, and the user controls and all of that fun stuff. And there are a host of applications in a similar vein that a lot of folks have used successfully to get into the cloud.
Yeah.
So we've got a question here. So finance, accounting, treasury professionals were not really trained and taught about external data and a lot of the technology with the cloud, et cetera. So a lot of these new technologies that are coming out are very new to these functions. How does one learn more about how from within these functions we can adopt these technologies and be more effective in our jobs? Yeah.
Well, I think you're taking the right step by engaging in these performative webinars. I mean, I think that's that's helpful. I think the example with Sears was interesting in that they started out by using Cloudera to do some of their work, and then got the expertise, and working with them, that they started to do more of it internally. So I would continue to seek outside expertise, those that have been there, done that, that can really kind of not fish for you, but teach you how to fish. And build up your capabilities. I think in some cases, we talked about talent management too. You're gonna need to think about some selective hires, some expertise that you don't have to have a richer and more diverse set of skills in your organization.
I think that talent management question is really an interesting one, and that points to needing skills that aren't necessarily always existing in your current organization. In your experience and what you see amongst your client and prospect base, are people going outside to have folks help them build those strategies for data, big data, analytics, the cloud, et cetera, or are they more homegrown in nature?
A lot of people are going outside to begin with, just because they just don't have it, but the idea is over time to have that capability in-house that they can move forward with that. But I think many organizations are struggling with a brand new world where there is a skill gap, and they need to address it in the short term.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question here, and I found this one interesting as well. Can you talk a little bit more about this data scientist position? What is that about? What skills do they need? How do they work with the business?
I will refer the reader to actually the most recent issue of HBR, which had a whole article on, I think it was called Data Scientist, the Sexiest Job in the 21st Century. It's kind of a pretty complete view of what these people are and why they're valuable and how hard they are to get. I mean, a lot of these the skills required are like almost they are PhD level math, and they go beyond just crunching the data. You need creative people that are asking the right questions. Some of the pitfalls that some of this early analytics stuff has gotten into is just well, we're just going to mine the data, and really what's found is to be more effective is to have a hypothesis that you're trying to work towards, and then maybe the data will suggest other ways to go. But just blindly mining data hasn't been all that productive. But I would refer to that article. It's an interesting one on the data scientists.
Okay, great. Wonderful, thank you. And with that, to be mindful of everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and get to the end of today's program. We've got a couple of quick things to take care of, a little housekeeping right here. You will be prompted to take a short survey. We appreciate you taking the 60 seconds. Plus, we'll make it real easy for you to connect with Bruce if you would like to follow up, ask him other questions, etc. Also, if you have any questions at all about CPE credits, please contact Tanya Walsh. You can see her email address there, pardon me, at the bottom of the form. We would like to thank the sponsor today, Baker Tilly. They are highly supportive of our activities at Performative, and it's through their support that we get, A, wonderful speakers like Bruce who really know their business and apply it in the real world every day, which is exactly the perspective we're looking for. And B, they allow us to do everything we do at Performative at no cost to our users, which of course is great for the users and allows us to have a website with no annoying banner ads and no selling or self-promotion. So it's all just great information from subject matter experts and peers. So great thanks to Baker Tilly. Bruce,
thank you, John. I really appreciate it. This is great. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'd be happy to have follow up with questions for those that have them.
Fantastic. That's great. We do appreciate that. And with that, we'll go ahead and end today's webinar. Thanks everyone once again for joining us. We hope to see you again soon at another event or at Performative Online. Have a great rest of your week.